Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com. And here we are in the overflow room, as you can see, where I'm going to be talking to you about the best versions of Aaron Copland's Symphony No. 3, his big one, the Big Kahuna, as they call it in Hawaii or somewhere like that. Now, the Third Symphony has its share of detractors. The reason, of course, is because it's an extremely loud piece of music, very, very pompous, somewhat bombastic, almost entirely celebratory, and more to the point, although there are moments of great stillness and beauty and inwardness, particularly in the first and third movements, it's not a piece that shows a great deal of tension. I mean, it's okay to be sort of pompous and bombastic if it's the result of some sort of monumental struggle where you draw everything to scale. But in Copland's Third Symphony, it's sort of celebratory without any other reason other than the fact that it wants to be celebratory, and people have never quite forgiven it for that. It doesn't bother me. Particularly, first of all, it's got tons and tons of tam-tam in it, which can't possibly be bad. But beyond that, it's just a big, happy piece of music. And I don't think there's anything wrong with writing a big, happy piece of music. The forms are generally simple and the textures lean and clear. It can be a bit screechy because Copland likes to write very, very high-pitched instruments in clumps, like high violins with piccolos, with glockenspiels, and, all the high instruments up on the top there. And that can sound really kind of shrill if you're not careful as far as the performance goes. That's not something that can't be dealt with, both by the performers and the recording engineers, but it often tends not to be. However, the piece has gotten a lot of play lately. It's gotten quite a few recordings. Do you remember back in the day, there were basically two options. You could have Aaron Copland's own recordings, or you could have Leonard Bernstein's recording. That was the Copland third. But now I have at least 7 or 8 others that are really quite good. One of the nice things about it is that because the exemplars in the work were Bernstein first and foremost, and to a certain extent even Copland himself, no one does the piece badly. There are no bad performances. There are performances I recommend more strongly over others for various reasons of detail, and some of those we'll talk about. But essentially, you're pretty safe no matter what you do. You have very, very few opportunities to go wrong. There are some preferences that I have, and I'll discuss those now. Let's talk about the performances. As I mentioned, Copland recorded the symphony, and he did it twice. The first was this one for Everest with the London Symphony Orchestra. And then he redid it for Sony with the London Symphony Orchestra, I think. I'm pretty sure. It was in London. I have it over here in the overflow pile, but I didn't feel I needed to pull it out. So, you can check yourself. I don't really care. Why? Because this one's better. I'm not recommending that one anyway. Now, the sound on this is not fabulous. The playing is a little ragged. And I think Copland's tempos are a little bit on the hasty side. I really do. They were not a great orchestra. This was in the late 50s, 58, it looks like, somewhere around there. And 59. It's a good performance to give you a sense, the composer's sense of the work. It's not the best performance out there. It never was regarded as the best performance out there. And Copland's remake is more sluggish and even more slackly held rhythmically and not fabulously well recorded either by Sony. It doesn't really do the work justice. So if you're going to get a Copland version, you have to find this Everest one. That's really your only choice. However, the guy who put the piece on the map was Leonard Bernstein, and he also recorded it twice. And I have both of those. The Columbia version is in one of these just huge, Bernstein, all the symphonies he ever did boxes for Sony. So that's sitting over there somewhere too. I'm not wasting my time with it. And here is the DG remake, the Deutsche Grammophon remake. Now, most people prefer the Columbia, the Sony recording, and I agree with them. I think it's more exciting. I think in its latest remastering, it really sounds quite good. It was one of those sort of screechy ones, but the engineers have put some of the body back into the orchestra, and now I think it sounds just fine. One of the things about this symphony that has always sort of counted against it is that the finale incorporates a version of the fanfare for the common man. Do 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 do. Da 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 da. You know how it goes, right? Here's the thing. Copland had no idea when he wrote the symphony that anyone would ever care about the fanfare for the common man. He thought that it was a one-off occasional piece that would never be played again. How could he know that it would become incredibly popular and that it would serve as like the model for all these other fanfare things that don't even quote from like the Olympic fanfare or the National Geographic specials? Remember the National Geographic specials? Bum bum ba ba dum ba 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 da dum ba da dum bum bum. It became ubiquitous. And because it was ubiquitous, when we hear the finale of the symphony, which is based on it, and it gets repeated a lot, and it's even louder, people sort of poo-poo the symphony. But that wasn't Copland's fault. That's history's fault. And I am not going to let that particular version of history be my paradigm for judging a work of music. Anyway, Bernstein's recordings are both marvelous. I also prefer the Sony version for its, greater elasticity and rhythmic energy. But I got to say, this one is not any worse. And if you like the fact that this is a celebratory kind of pompous and bombastic piece, boy, is this the version for you. Because Bernstein is completely unapologetic about it. And that's the way you have to be. You can't play music that you're embarrassed by, You have to have the courage of your convictions. And if anyone had the courage of their convictions, it was Bernstein. So either way, you're in very, very good shape. You really are. And I think that you should be very comfortable with either version. Interestingly, Bernstein did ask Copland, and Copland obliged, to revise the ending of the symphony, which Bernstein found embarrassingly pompous and bombastic. And if Bernstein found it embarrassingly pompous and bombastic, then whoa, it really must have been, right? Well, unfortunately, we were able to find out. Why? Because the one version, which is a great version, but I don't recommend it, is the Leonard Slatkin remake on Naxos, because he uses the original ending. And that original ending shows conclusively that Bernstein was right and Copland was right to revise it. They really were. It wasn't just a question of making a cut, which is what the rumor was. It was actually a fairly substantial rewrite of the closing pages. And Copland not only tightened it up, but made the whole ending sound much more inevitable and successful. I had no problem hearing it once, courtesy of Maestro Slatkin, and I hope I never, ever, ever hear it again. The necessity of reviving these original thoughts is sort of the disgusting, toxic overhang of the Bruckner movement, where, composers never know what they're doing, and history always judges better later. Sometimes history just does judge better later, but not usually. And not when you've got a composer like Copland, who was very, very meticulous and very sure of what he was doing, and who had interpreters who were very sure of what they were doing and who he trusted completely. There's just no need or reason to go back to the original ending. But if you want to hear it, get Slatkin on Naxos. Otherwise, either Bernstein version is great. But now I want to tell you about sort of subsequent to Bernstein and talk about some of them. Because there's some really, really good ones out there. One of them is this one. This is the Dallas Symphony Orchestra with Eduardo Mata. Now, Eduardo Mata was great at this kind of music. He just was. He did French music really well. He did big orchestral blockbusters really well, as those Dorian recordings and some of the RCA recordings show. And his Copland Third is first class. And really well recorded. It sounds terrific. It's absolutely marvelous. It's been reissued a few different ways. This is not the latest incarnation of it. There is another one on EMI. It's readily available, and it's certainly worth hearing. It's very, very good. And I'm dropping these. Wait a minute. Oh, my God. Hang on. We're going to have a disaster. I still haven't gotten a table so I can put stuff on here in the overflow room. I have a chair over there. I should just move it. Anyway, there. We took care of it without a disaster. Next, everyone was waiting for this. This was Joel Levy and the Atlanta Symphony. Not because it was Joel Levy and the Atlanta Symphony, but because it was on Telarc. And we all knew the sound was going to be terrific. And the sound is terrific. The performance, on the other hand, I think it's a little on the sluggish side, especially in the scherzo. Not terribly. I mean, it's a again, rhythmically taught, very well played performance, but compared to what else is out there, this one is not my favorite. And it's got a fabulous music for the theater with it, by the way. But the Third Symphony strikes me as just a little bit sort of loud but underpowered. You know what I mean? So I don't go for Levy, but you may feel differently. However, there are some other good ones. This was a petite, however. We haven't gotten to the however. But this one, it was a big surprise. In fact, I'm going to play you. I'm jiggling things now. I have to get used to the whole setup here in the overflow room. It's been a little while. Okay, here we go. James Judd with the New Zealand Symphony. Now, Judd and the New Zealand Symphony did some really first-class work for Naxos. They really have. Remember their Bernstein Jeremiah Symphony? It was every bit as good as Bernstein's. And this Copland Third is first-rate. Absolutely first-rate. The sonics are not as fabulous as you're going to hear on Telarc and some of these other labels we're talking about. But it's a marvelous performance. And I want to play you a little bit. I'm going to play you the reprise and end of the scherzo, because it's like one of my favorite parts of the symphony. And, this is a performance that is every bit as exciting as Copland's own. It's lean, it's lively, it's exciting without being excessively bombastic and pretentious. It's really, really good. So just take a listen to this, and I'm sure you'll agree with me. First class, right? I mean, it really is first class. So I was very excited that this came out, and I listen to it fairly regularly when I want to hear Copland's Third. It's just about as good as anything out there. It truly is. But there are three others that I want to tell you about that are also exceptional. First, let's see. Well, let's do this one. First, this was Leonard Slatkin's first recording on RCA with the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra and the regular ending. This is a great one. This is absolutely great. Slatkin, was fabulous in this music. This is a absolutely first-class performance. It's wonderfully played, wonderfully recorded. There's just nothing wrong anywhere. Nothing. Zero. Zippo. It's as good a performance as you'll ever hear. Also, equally fine. I mean, it's really remarkable how much is out there. Equally fine, and I mean, sonically, perhaps the best of all, is this one with A.G. Owe and the Minnesota Orchestra on reference recordings. This is hot stuff. It comes with the Appalachian Spring Suite and the Fanfare for the Common Man, which makes sense when you're considering, the symphony incorporates it. A wonderful, wonderful performance. totally exciting, totally first class. And if you are an audiophile, oh baby, your ship has come in, because this will blow you into the next room. It's absolutely tremendous. I'm very surprised if you people talk about that version, because it's great. And Copland's Third has become sort of an audiophile classic, because it's, crashing tam tam and pounding bass drum and the brass going nuts. It's absolutely a demonstration worthy piece for your stereo system. So that's a terrific, terrific version. However, and this is the big however, and this is going to surprise you, my favorite recording that I like even better than Bernstein's. I'll bet you all thought, oh, I was going to say get Bernstein. No. I think you should get Bernstein, because I think Bernstein is historically a very, very important version by a major, the major Copland interpreter of the 20th century. However, my favorite version is very, very recent, extremely recent, and I was totally unlooked for. I never expected it. It's on pentatone, and it's with this stupidly named collection, Spirit of the American Range. You get Pistons, the Incredible Flutist, and Antheil's Jazz Symphony. What on earth does the Jazz Symphony have to do with the American Range? Unless the range is, of course, like, a microwave, a stovetop. It has nothing to do with it. And Copland's Third Symphony. But this is Carlos Kalmar, who, if you know his recordings with the Grant Park Orchestra, that are on CD, he's a really good conductor. And this is the Oregon Symphony, which doesn't get a lot of airplay, at least disc play, shall we say. And they just knock it out of the park. This is fantastic. This is a performance, when I first heard it, I said, it's a performance that's in the same vein as Copland's Everest recording. In other words, the tempos are swift, the textures are lean, which makes all of the noise and brouhaha it sound effective without it ever turning excessively pompous or bombastic, because Copland was a Stravinsky and he was not a sentimentalist. And so he felt that he should be able to write grandiose, or in the grand manner, as he used to call it, without it turning excessively pompous. That's exactly what this achieves. It has grandeur without pomposity. It is fantastic. It's just exciting as hell. Really well played, much better played than Copland's recording is. And it's recorded by pentatone. It's really, really, really good engineering. It's a wonderful performance, and it's completely unexpected. It's a sleeper, and probably not one that you even noticed when it came out, if you noticed it at all, but it's available, and it's great, and you should hear it. It is my recommendation for Copland's Third Symphony, Carlos Kalmar and the Oregon Symphony. So, with this done, I think we've covered just about all the major recordings of Copland's Third Symphony. Go forth and listen. Keep on listening. Thank you, and take care.